Hello and welcome to Module 6. We have two more modules after this one, of course, with 8 modules. And so we are in the final stretch of the class. However, there's still quite a bit of work to be done. Um, you've achieved a major milestone in completing the complete graph in Module 5. And in Module 6, we'll be taking some steps toward revising that draft. You can find the essay as well as starting to discuss what differences we need to make between that essay to address a second module. So let's get started. First of all, let's read the learning objectives because there's only one assignment for Module 6, so it's very focused. The module is focused on, here's the learning objective: adapt to different communication based on the needs of a different audience and writing situation. So up until now, we've been focusing on a single essay directed at one audience, being explored possible second audiences. But so far, we haven't really talked about what has to happen in the draft in order to address a second audience. So that's going to be the focus of this module, specifically the discussion that we'll be doing. This is a peer review discussion. Be sure that you read the module overview. I want to read the beginning to again focus you on what we're attempting to learn and practice in this module. This module helps you practice rethinking an idea and its support in terms of a second audience and the needs of that audience. This gives you a process for adapting writing to multiple audiences and situations. The discussion this week offers you the opportunity to exchange ideas with classmates and see which choices they are making about audience and situation. So that's a really good description of what we'll actually be doing. As always, information about what you'll learn in Module 6, why you will learn about it, and some tips for success, which are always important. The first one here, we'll look at again when we get to the actual instructions for the discussion. But it suggests that you use the question starters in the discussion to help you provide feedback to your peers in these discussions. Read your peers' initial posts closely before sharing your feedback. So that gives you an opportunity to be sure that you're covering what's being asked for, but also to practice beginning your responses with topic sentences. And then also thoughtfully consider the feedback you receive from your peers. It may help you revise your writing and continue the project. So after this module is complete, the first part then in Module 7, you'll be going back and reviewing the feedback both from your instructor and from your classmates. And finally, the module at a glance. Pretty simple this week. We will read the student guide, review the resources, participate in the peer review discussion, and then look ahead at how to do well in Module 7. So let's get started. The Module 6 guide is focused on peer review. This is our first experience of peer review in this course, and depending on what other classes you've taken so far at SMAT, you may have done peer review in another class. Peer review is simply having your classmates look at your work and you look at theirs and provide them with some suggestions for how to make their work better. The importance of peer review is twofold, both in the giving and the receiving. By receiving feedback, you get another set of eyes on your own writing to help you be able to see your writing in a different way. A lot of times when we're first doing a piece of writing, we're so focused on what it is we're trying to accomplish that we may overlook some things that are also important to the effectiveness of the writing. And having someone else look at it can make us think about those other things again. They can point out areas where things could be strengthened, things don't fit in, etc. So the first and the second thing is giving the feedback. It's important in the same way, in that you have to know what it is the writing is trying to accomplish before you can determine whether or not it's being effective. So you have to understand the assignment, what it is, the purpose of the essay is, in order to be able to give feedback that's meaningful and insightful to your classmates. In doing that, you have to think about what you already know about effective writing for this particular assignment. You need to be able to then express that information to your classmate. You need to communicate that effectively to them. So you get practice not only reading your other people's work, your own work, but also communicating your observations about both your own work and of the particular. Participate in peer review. Here are some tips for effective peer review. Peer review is an opportunity for feedback. For a lot of people, it's anxiety provoking because it's uncomfortable to share your work with the rest of the class. And that's a given. Most people do feel anxious about it. It's difficult to know that other people are going to read it and that they're going to comment on it. If you can focus rather on the fact that it's being helpful to you, that your writing is going to improve as a result of you having shared it with the rest of the class. You've had a little bit of practice sharing your writing because you've shared it with me each week. It's a little bit more daunting, of course, to share it with your classmates because you don't have the same kind of relationship with your classmates. You haven't had a whole lot of interaction with them. You've had some in the discussions, but you haven't met them, talked to them face to face. So that's another part of the anxiety, is that it's an unknown in that sense. But again, if you can focus on the fact that this is going to help your writing become more effective, and that will also help you get a better grade. Second, when giving feedback, be supportive and specific. Good job is not as helpful to your peer as I think you did a great job addressing your first audience, but I think your word choice will need to change significantly with a new audience. Maybe consider using a more informal tone with your second audience. Be very specific about where the issue is occurring, how it's occurring, and then why it's important. In this case, the comment that's made is telling you that the word choice needs to be different with a different audience. Maybe consider using a more informal tone with your second audience. It's giving you a suggestion on how to make it more effective. So your comments need to do the same thing. They need to show where the problem is occurring, why it's a problem, and then how it can be fixed. When providing feedback to your peers, you might find that you think of revisions in your own work. That's an additional benefit to giving feedback. Feel free to take a break from peer reviews to work on your own revisions. If you're reading someone else's and something comes out that you hadn't thought about in your own work, feel free to stop and go and make a revision or make a note to remind yourself to make that change when you have the time. Revisiting audience and writing situation. We covered those in earlier modules, and for some people it might be necessary to go back and review those. The main thing is to remember that all writing has a purpose. There's a reason that you're writing it in a particular situation, and all writing has an audience. Who is it you're trying to communicate to? In our case, in this discussion, we're going to be focusing on how it changes, how your writing changes from one audience to another. The most obvious difference is, for instance, if you're trying to communicate with an adult versus a communication with a child. Different language, different tone, different focus, different attention spans, different knowledge of the topics. All those things have to be considered. And so there's a list of key questions here to help you think about the differences between audiences and writing situations. And then key concepts we've already talked about, that in giving and receiving feedback that you benefit doubly. When your audience changes, your writing situation changes. So you'll need to be thinking about how is the situation different because of the second audience. I always encourage students to think about, pretend that this essay is a time where you're orally presenting something to an audience. So you have people sitting in front of you in chairs that pay money to come and see you. What is it they're there for? Why have they come? What information do they hope to get? And who are they? Why have they come? Then our next section is, of course, resources. And there's only one reading assignment this time, and it's a little bit of a review. Chapter 36 focused on introductions and conclusions. You've already, by this time, written an introduction and a conclusion for your draft essay that was submitted in Module 5. So it's still helpful to review this information because you'll be doing your revisions between now and Module 7 to the draft that you've already written. Remember that drafts are meant to be imperfect, so it's not too late to learn new things about how to make an effective introduction and conclusions, and then actually incorporate those in your revisions. Secondly, under the optional is a video that we have also viewed in previous modules. I believe it was in Module 2 when we were doing critical reading. The reason that it's included here is to have you think about critical reading as you read your classmates' initial post in the discussion. Several of the concepts covered in this video are also applicable to the reading of another person's work in order to give suggestions for what's working well in the theme's additional work. So it's only a 2.5 minute video, so be sure to take a look at that one as well. Refresh your memory. We come to the actual assignment, and I want to point out, first of all, that there is a sample. I'm sure all of you know how to get to the discussions. So you're just going to scroll down to 6-1 peer review discussion. And as always, you'll have all the information that you normally have, points possible, as well as the instructions. And then if you click on this to open it, then you will see, if you scroll down, that there is a sample initial post. Please read that before making your own initial post to give you a really good idea of what needs to be included. So let's take a look at the instructions first, and then we'll take a look at the sample. Create one initial post and provide feedback to 2 of your peers who have not yet received feedback. That's important. Make sure that everybody gets a review, and do not give someone a second review if there's someone who still hasn't had a first review. Try not to do more than just a couple of reviews for each person. I think we have 15 people in our class, so be sure that you're scrolling down and finding those people who have not yet received a review before you do a second review. All right, for your initial post, address the following. Number 1, using the first audience draft that you submitted to Module 5, share the part of the introduction that focuses on attracting the audience. And so that was drawing in the reader. The first few sentences of the introduction paragraph where you're focusing on drawing the reader in, getting them to keep on reading. Number 2, state who the intended audience was in the first audience draft. So that's the one that you submitted last week. Number 3, using the written response that you submitted in Module 2, remember back to Module 2, share the second audience that you chose for the second version of your paper. You are free to change that second audience. Sometimes as you've moved forward and gone through the other steps up to this point, you may have different ideas about the audience. Some of you are using the same audience for your own audience that were the audiences for the original chosen article. You may need to change that. You may have had 2 audiences that were very similar. Now it will just make your job harder. You want to try to have audiences that are different so that it makes it easier for you to adapt your writing to meet that audience's needs. Then number 4, explain how you plan to adapt your writing to meet the needs of the second audience. So basically, you need to share with us what your plan is for changing the drawing the reader in section of the introduction for your second essay. All right, so let's take a look then at the sample. As all the samples are focused on the chosen or the article, what everyone needs to know to be more productive by Dana Rosmanier. And note that it's the student writer who is speaking about their evaluation essay. So it's in first person, and it's as though you're stepping in with your own voice of your writings. The first part of my introduction is where I'm focused on the needs of my audience. My first audience was employees who feel pressure to be productive. Here's the introduction, first part I created to that audience. Then they just copied and pasted the drawing in the reader section of the introduction paragraph from what was submitted in Module 5 as a draft. That's easy to do. You've identified the audience, you copied and pasted that section of your introduction from the draft. Then the next thing, and this is in bold as well, in this version of my introduction post, I focused on the fear employees might feel, and I used fear-based language that might evoke emotions and make them want to keep reading. Words such as overtaken, replacing, crisis, surviving, neglect, depression. Note how this is very specific, this analysis of how effectively this attempt at drawing in the reader, this is what I did to attempt to draw in that reader. I knew that they would have fear, and so I tried to use words that were fear-based in order to evoke that emotion in them. And here are examples of the words that I used. You should be able to be this specific in your response to the initial post as well. And the next paragraph is making that predicted plan for changing to a second audience. For my second audience, the management staff overseeing the work of these employees and probably worrying about how to both motivate and encourage them so they keep working and don't quit, I will change the language to include what managers can do to motivate and encourage their staff. But I still include some fear-based language. The revision might look something like this. Then we have a paragraph with the changes made. In the instructions, it does not specifically say that you have to do the paragraph with these changes made. However, I strongly encourage you to go ahead and do that. To tell us the plan that is required, but why not go ahead and write the paragraph? In doing so, give your classmates an opportunity to give you feedback about whether or not that paragraph is effectively communicating to that second audience. Also, it gives you a head start on writing the second essay for Module 7. So I encourage you to write the paragraph just as you would be for your essay. It does not give you specifics that we could, if we were to do one additional step, we could have the student point out, these are the changes that I made in language. These are the changes that I made in attitude or ideas. There should be differences. It should be very clear to a reader, to an audience, that there are differences between the introduction for the first audience and the introduction for the second audience. So that's why it's so important to read the samples, to think about how they match the instructions, and then also to always look at the grading rubric to see how they're being assessed for meeting the instructions. The second part of every discussion is, of course, the response post. And as in all of our discussions, it's something specific that is being asked for in those response posts. They shouldn't be just general responses. They should be responses that provide feedback. Specifically, number one, you should include one question. Consider these question starters. Have you thought about? Have you considered? What do you think about? Is your second audience concerned with? How will your introductions change when? Those are all things that might be considered as part of your look at the second audience and how effective they're drawing the reader in when it's that second audience. So you need to include one question, be specific about where, why, and how. Where is it occurring? Why is it a problem? How do you suggest it might be these revised? And that's where number 2 comes in. Include one suggestion or idea. So don't just ask a question, answer it as well. Include one suggestion on how that could be fixed, made more effective, or an idea that you have that would help overall. And then finally, as I said before, you need to take a look at the discussion rubric. The discussion rubric never changes, but it's always a good idea to reread the exceeds expectations column for the criteria to see if you're doing what it takes to exceed expectations and earn full points and benefit completely for the things that are being learned and practiced in this discussion. There are no example responses. That's because we don't want to tell you what to think. We know that you're able to think on your own and encourage you to practice that skill of thinking on your own, analyzing someone else's work, and then being able to write effectively to communicate what you've observed in your analysis. There's just one more thing in the module, and normally I don't take the time to look at these. But this time I thought it was important. So we click on past the final assignment in module 6 to the last post in module 6, which is the look ahead, how to do well in module 7. And I want to read this because it's a good. I think it's important to always be aware of what's coming next so that you can be prepared and do some time management. In module 7, you will submit your project. Now is a great time to review the project guidelines and rubric in the assignment information area. You should also prepare by revising the first draft as soon as you receive feedback from your instructor. Be sure to reach out to your instructor as soon as possible if you have any questions or concerns. Make sure you incorporate all feedback received on any drafts you have created. I think that's, in a nutshell, what we need to be focusing on once we complete module 6. Because the next thing is module 7, where you're going to turn in this project that we've been working on through all the modules. I will be working really hard this week to get that feedback on your draft to you as soon as possible. So as soon as you get that, be sure that you're taking a look at it, making some kind of a plan about when you're going to work on revising your draft, making some notes about revising your draft, looking at the feedback that you got from the discussion this week. And also be aware that the expectation is that you're going to use the feedback received to make revisions, to make changes, to make improvements. So one of the things that I'll be looking for in the final essays are evidence that you have done that you've read the feedback, that you've applied it, and that you understand the importance of that process. So it's not just some step that we step through and go on without using it. The expectation is that you will be using the feedback that you receive to make your writing more effective. We've been working on an overall writing process from the very beginning of this course, and we're reaching the conclusion of that writing process by making those submissions in module 7.